takeaways for lesson 3. We have two very important topics to talk about. So first one is make mistakes early. And what does it mean? It means that if you work as a concept artist and you draw a lot and you draw concepts, you're gonna eventually make mistakes. And now question is, do you admit them or you shy away from them? Basically, the idea is that if you make mistakes early, and remember, doing concept art, especially in pre-production, is the cheapest form of pre-production. Basically, your images cost literally nothing compared to overall cost of games production. All the time you spend as one person working on an image for a couple of hours is just a couple of hours of your daily rate, of your hourly rate, compared to a whole team of artists that will take your image and decipher it and then work from there. They will let's imagine that you've created an environment painting, and what that means for the whole production. It means that not only game designers or level designers will work with that painting and work with you to create an environment and spend time moving objects and moving things inside the game engine or in Maya or whatever software is used by the level designer. They will make changes to the layout and how the gameplay plays. Those changes might mean that there's maybe a new set of animations that has to be done to support the new elevations or new changes to the layout. That also means that there might be new textures that are going to be involved. Maybe the texture choices that you suggest means that there's specific new textures that have to be created, or maybe there's another way of what those textures are going to be, because there's limitations of how many textures you can see. And finally, 3D artists, and whether it's a background artist that create the environments in 3D, or foreground artists that will create assets that are movable and stuff like that. This is a humongous amount of work. If you combine all the manpower that has to be involved in order to take your concept and then create something out of it that is playable as a final game, starting from 3D models, textures, animations, layouts, lighting itself. Even lighting artists will take your sketch, decipher exactly what kind of lighting scenario you're using. Now, all those things have to work together in the final image and support the idea that is in head of a game designer or game director or a creative director. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and your concept is a first stage. It's a first step. So it's granted that you're going to make mistakes. The truth is, from my experience, my personal experience working for video games and my personal career, was that in the beginning I was making a lot of mistakes. The problem was, and I've learned that lesson really quickly, is I was trying to avoid and trying to not admit that I made those mistakes. I was trying to defend my poor choices in concept art. You cannot do that. You just have to work with a solid foundation. So if your foundation is solid, if you can back your ideas with something that makes sense and is provable, then you're not making mistakes, then you're actually educating. But if you are assuming that you're right because you really like your image, because you like what you've done, and then try to convince everyone else that this is the right way, you potentially might be wasting a lot of time and money of the whole development cycle. And this is really important because everyone makes mistakes, and that just happens even in video games development. That's why so many games are postponed. That's why there's crunch time. That's why there's, because of so many moving pieces and human error, a lot of things are not going according to the plan. So in mind, if you can be that one part that is unshaken, where you're known for not making mistakes, or for putting a lot of effort to avoid those mistakes, or putting a lot of effort to make those mistakes in the very beginning, but then fix them and deliver the product that will be used for everyone else, and they can take lesson from your own failures. That's the way to go. That's how you're gonna build trust, and that's how you're gonna become one of the better ones out there as a concept artist. And speaking about being attached to your work and defending your work, that's the biggest mistake that you can make when you work in video games, because you have to remember you're hired to create a part of what this game is. You're not creating the game for yourself. It's not your personal pet project. It's not it's the game that you're working on, unless your intentions are only to build portfolio, which in the long run is a really bad idea, just to work that way, because it means that you might potentially burn a lot of bridges if you just think about egoistically about your own work and nothing else. If you're only focused on yourself when you work in video games, you're not only putting a lot of mistakes, a lot of those errors that you're making, because you will make errors, you will make mistakes, and a lot of that can be avoided. And if you're too attached to your work, from that angle, it means that maybe your sales pitch, or maybe you can talk your way out of your own bullshit, if you know what I mean. And if you do that, then you're potentially wasting a lot of time and money. So I would say don't do that. Don't even try, because in the long run, everyone will see that was a mistake, and everyone will point finger to the right direction. All of those things always come out. So another angle is, if you're attached to something and someone else makes a mistake, right? You have potentially no way to avoid, or no way to prevent someone else from making that mistake, making a poor gameplay choice, or maybe the map itself, maybe that one level is going to be scrapped for a reason of maybe the storytelling was missing some parts and needed some rewrites, and some things just had to be redone or done differently. If you attach yourself to a concept, and you're just gonna feel bitter, and you're gonna feel sad that this concept is being thrown away, and that's the worst thing you can do, because frankly, quite a lot of concepts that you do will never end up in the final product. The idea is you are a team member. Your ideas that are out there are supposed to inspire, are supposed to build foundation, but are also supposed to expose which pathways and which decisions are wrong, simply wrong. Because it's one thing to put something on paper, make a description of how the location looks like, and what the story is, and how the story is supporting this location, and how it's going to be lit, and how it's going to look. Words mean nothing when it comes to how the thing's going to look. Images mean everything, and you will create a lot of images that will, maybe you're going to paint them beautifully and you'll be happy with the results, but they will miss the point, or maybe it will expose that the ideas behind that image, maybe the lighting choice made by a creative director was wrong in the first place, and which means you have to start the image from scratch. You have to create something new and fresh to test new idea and see if that works. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. A lot of changes happen during the game production, because the cycle of the game production is so long. It takes years to create a video game, which means during that time, there's new technology, new software, new ideas coming into the table. People that work together with you on the project are actually learning with you while working on it, and realize that some of the concepts they had in their heads in the beginning might not necessarily be the smartest one, and they come up with something that is much better. And when that happens, those ideas change. Then we have rewrites, then we have meetings, and then we scrap some parts of the game and create new levels at the very end of the production. That just happens. This is how, as bad as it sounds, it's sometimes a good thing. Because if there's an extra effort, and if you realize that something doesn't work and make an effort to fix it, no matter when it happens, the end result is going to be better. It's just going to be a better game, more interesting game. And that's the whole point, making really good games. And You have to remember you're a part of a bigger team. And creating something as complex as video game is a humongous team effort. And if there is no team effort coming from you, then you're not part of the game. Then you're just an artist that is trying to do something on your own and not necessarily hitting all the marks. So try to disattach yourself from liking your own ideas or concepts, because some of them that might just not work. You might feel like from perspective of composition or color or lighting, this is a great choice. But in reality, it might mean that those choices are not necessarily supporting the way the gameplay plays out, or maybe the way storytelling plays out in that specific location. So there is a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that can change, and you just have to accept that fact and know that your effort, even if something is being thrown away, it's not a wasted work. It means that you explored the idea that was on the table and shown that this pathway is wrong. And from there, everyone is just moving on and whether trying something new or realizing that something is wrong, that this doesn't look as it's supposed to look, so we have to change it, and now we know how to change it to make it better. So always think about your concept work, especially when you work for a studio and video games. It's a team effort, which means don't get attached to your own work. I mean, at the end of the day, when the game is finished and you have your portfolio pieces, for an audience, it doesn't matter if this one piece that you've created is made to the game or not. It's great to see your concepts to be in the game, but the reality is, majority of those images that you see online that are released with the game screenshots, amazing concept art for a video game, the reality is those are post-production works. This is when you already have a level, you already have lighting figured out, you already done hundreds of concepts or dozens of concepts before that and sketches before that to realize or make mistakes and show the pathway for everyone else in the team and do the team effort to find the right lighting, to find the right position of objects or layout, and find the right storytelling elements and colors and values. And once all of that is figured out, then you step in again and do that overpaint on top of already existing environments. And then that's when you have this amazing polished pieces that their only purpose is to add the extra detail to make the game look even better where it can be better, right? Just to get that extra effort done and make the game to be stunning, not just great looking, but stunning. But that's not a majority of the work that you're going to do. So never attach yourself to your work, because majority of it is going to be thrown away. And you just don't want to be that one person being bitter that, okay, like, why am I putting effort if it's all thrown away? It isn't. It's just the way this whole thing works. This is how team effort works. Not everything is going to be a success, and failures are not bad. Failures actually mean that some of the collective ideas just didn't work, and there was a concept art needed or some team effort to put those things from the concept together needed to be done in order to realize, okay, this just doesn't work. And that's pretty much it. That's if you start to look at concept art and this kind of work in a way that you're part of the team and all you do is helping everyone else to make their work better, you will see how much better, how much easier it is to not only concept those things, but actually put much more effort into those concepts to make them amazing, not only for yourself, but for everyone else. Okay, so the second homework here would be to create one sketch using techniques learned from lesson 2 and add values to those sketches. So basically, this is what we see right here. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So we're using lines to outline exactly what kind of construction we have, and based on that construction later on we're adding values. So it would be just one of those, and ideally, the more you do, the better, the quicker you're gonna learn, and the quicker you can apply those techniques later in your production work. So I would assume make at least 3 of those, 3 or more. Similar situation here. If you can do 3 or more images like that, that's going to be ideal and it's going to be better. And always go back to them. Like once you finish the whole course, do it again. Do all those homework assignments again, and repeat those, because that's gonna give you a lot of work and a lot of practice that you might need to master those techniques. Obviously, mastering those techniques will take you quite some time. It could be anywhere between weeks to months, but if you repeatedly come back and do those techniques again and again and again, you'll get better and better and better at doing those, and faster at using those techniques. And because concept art itself is very complicated art, it's a very complicated form of art where there's quite a lot of ingredients that are added to the mix, perspective and lines and values and everything. So when you just look at those 2 images, and we are just in lesson 3, you can see that there's quite a variety of ways you can present your image, whether it's this sort of traditional kind of looking sketch, or this more digital feel, but yet using only or using mostly layer masks, and creating this very graphical expressionist sort of look. Both of those techniques are looking different, but they have similar tools, and you can choose whichever path you want to create those images, or work with those images. But if you know how to create both ways, it's going to be more tools and better practice for you to understand when you work towards your end goal, which is creating a concept art. So for a beginner artist, that would be a ideal solution. So let's look at what advanced artists are supposed to create. So advanced artist, option first would be to create a mood sketch with attention to detail, then create the same environment but with different light direction, and make it as close to construction wise to the first sketch as possible. Which means if we look at this sketch right here, and let's just do a little drawing. Let's say we have this rock right here. So you can imagine that this rock is constructed somehow this way, right? And you can sort of like create a grid around that rock, so just to get a better understanding of how this is constructed. And you can make maybe a grid like this, just to give it more. So in 3 dimensions, this could look something like that. And obviously it's then cut this way and whatnot. But right now we have a situation where our lighting is creating shadow that is right here, right? So because there are rocks in front of it, it's obviously going to be highlights here, but the shadow is basically probably something like this because of the directionality of light coming from here. So that's your first light. But what I want you to try to do is, now having this rock, and bear in mind there's much more construction here going on, so keeping every single object in mind, choose different lighting. Maybe the lighting is coming from here this time around. Okay, so that means that your shadow is actually going to be on the other side, which in essence will mean that the whole image is going to look completely different. And you're supposed to do at least one of those exercises. So you create one image with the original light. So let's use that color code, the yellow, which would be the OG, the original. And one image that would be alternate, so alt. And basically that way you're gonna have quite a challenge, because depending on how much of the construction you're going to do here, whether you're going to go with environment or architecture, it doesn't really matter. What it matters is you're using this technique, and then you're applying this lighting to this technique, and then you're changing the lighting completely by just understanding what kind of forms you've built. So your first image will serve as a reference to what you're going to do with the second image. And that's going to be quite a challenge, but here's why you should do it that way. Because quite often, unless you're using 3D in creation of your images, you might face a situation where you have to change the lighting because the script changes, and you have to still keep the same construction, which means this exercise is pretty valid in that situation, because then you know, okay, this is how I analyze the image. I've done this before, and as you're doing it, you're making mistakes, you're making errors, and you know how to fix them. Or you see where the errors are, you see where your thinking processes are stalling, and you get to understand, okay, maybe I need to repeat a little more and spend a little more time on how things are constructed. So going back to lesson 1, and deciphering how things are constructed into simple forms, simple geometrical forms. And once you get a little more practice on that, then it will be much easier to decipher which direction the light is coming from, and how this light is casting shadows and whatnot. So that will be exercise number 1, or the option number 1. Option number 2 is when you take this sketch right here that we see here. So you start with just line art. So let's draw like maybe this column right here, okay? So you have this column that is constructed this way. And obviously in the background, the lines we don't see are pretty much something like this. So you construct your image that way. Obviously without those lines, those background lines, you don't have to paint them, but you see how those those assets are constructed here. So you make a construction like this without using values at all. You just use your perspective skills. You set up a perspective. You create an environment. You can choose any of the architectural styles that we've discussed so far, and then you create a chunk of environment, whether it's a couple of buildings together, or maybe some ruins, or maybe it's a building with some kind of a landscape around it. It's up to you. Use references. Obviously, if you find a photo that you want to decipher, deconstruct, and then actually do a drawing out of it, use that by all means. But the idea is you only create line art. You're not doing any of those shading exercises that we did so far. So you have to construct every single line. All right, so you do one of those. And then from there, I want you to try to do 2 different lights. So you basically create a light direction that maybe is coming from one side. And then you shade, you create maybe a brand new file. And then you use exactly the techniques that we see right here in this image, and apply it down here to this image, but you keep the lines. So you're going to choose one light direction and apply values while keeping the lines, or actually after you do that, so that's the light number 1, you're gonna maybe add light number 2, which is coming from opposite direction. Which direction the light is coming from is up to you. You can choose something that works for you, but the idea is that once you have the line sketch, you can now change the lighting and change the shading and the way the values work depending on the light direction. So in essence, you're creating 3 images from here, which one would be the original image, which is just line art, and then 2 other images would be a variation of that image with different values, different light direction. And that will be pretty much it for this homework.